Hey everyone, this is Liam here. I know what you're thinking, right? A serious message before my podcast instead of the usual comedic intro. Well, there is a first for everything. I just wanted to put this message out there right now to apologize for the fact that the UFC 217 custom commentary won't be out until next week due to a delay in editing and production on my end. Now, the video version of it I still plan to put out tomorrow, which is the Monday as of this podcast date on the Sunday. So that will still be out, and it will be the live reaction of this version of reality and the first ever actual live video recorded version of this version of reality, including the live reaction of UFC 217, an event which was actually last Sunday, but still something that I plan to put out there. And next week will be the planned UFC 217. For now, I do have what I would consider to be probably one of my most important and serious episodes of this version of reality, a serious discussion and something that is definitely worth a listen. I hope you do enjoy it, and I hope you do accept my apology for those that are actually listening and were expecting the UFC 217 custom commentary. That will be out next Sunday, like I said, with the live reaction on my YouTube channel, Liamo All-Star, will be out tomorrow. But for now, I hope you enjoy the show, and like always, if you do enjoy it, like, share, subscribe. But let's get the show started in this version of reality. Hey, welcome to this version of reality yet again. My name is Liamo All-Star, but you already knew that, of course you did. How's everyone doing? Well, I gotta say myself, I need to turn my brain off, and yet here I am, working, if you will, putting out another podcast, doing a whole bunch of routines, and doing a whole lot of work to make the financial ends meet during the day, doing all that in between to make everything work, doing all the video recordings, and somewhere in between doing my own personal training, doing some fitness, doing some, I don't know, what else am I doing? I'm doing pretty much everything at the moment. So, that's pretty much me right now. I need to turn my brain off. That's the topic of this podcast. How the hell do I turn my brain off? I'm constantly, even right now, doing a podcast, multitasking, as I go, as I do things, as I'm on my way home. You could almost call this an on the drive home version of this version of reality. Starting my car. Making nonsense. I'm just prattling around, just making a lot of crap up as I go along, just to sort of fill in the few seconds to distract the people from the fact that I'm actually shifting my car into gear and driving in reverse and going backwards and trying not to hit anything. Of course, the overthinker, because that's the thing, I am an overthinker. I think about everything. I'm constantly, brain's just turning. It's like revving up, high revs, all the time. Thinking about lots of different things and different scenarios. How do I turn my brain off? Do I relax? Do I zen? Well, there's many different things I can do, and of course I'm well aware of that. But nonetheless, that still requires my brain to be turned on. And there are things that I've got to do. the things that I'm doing right now. Every day of the week, pretty much. You got the Monday, where, I guess, for me, unusually, Monday seems to be probably one of the more lax days of the week, even though it's the first day of the week and it's pretty much planning for a week ahead. You know, even with comedy, when I've got the gig on a Monday, or if I don't have the gig on a Monday, if I'm doing something on a Monday, you know, it's always relaxed for me. Maybe because Monday is that hectic day of the week. It's busy. And I know what I'm doing. I know what's going to happen. It's weird. Tuesday, got training. Sometimes, every once in a while, yet again a gig. But typically a day of training. Of course, after a day of work, you know, can be a little strenuous depending on where I'm situated at work at the time, because current day job has me going from place to place. So travel can be just a little further and farther in between. So my work is physically involving, and then I physically put myself through training in order to better my physical condition, to keep up my skill, my ability, everything else, etc., blah blah, just lose it. Wednesday it's always that interesting day for me as well, you know, because Wednesday as well, there's a lot going on. There's a lot happening on a Wednesday, and a lot that's got to be done by Wednesday. And that's usually, I think that for me especially, Wednesday is always that day for me. They call it hump day. It's the halfway between the week. People start to feel better about themselves. I guess it's probably the opposite for me. By Wednesday, I'm starting to think in my head, you know, things I've put off, they've got to be done, I've got to do this, but I never get it done, because by Thursday, it's the same routine as Tuesday, and then by Friday, oh no, nearly the weekend, whereas everyone else is thinking, oh yay, it's the weekend, excellent. See, already, overthinking, thinking. Probably thinking, yeah, has this guy had too much caffeine, too much sugar? No, actually not. I am tired right now, and much of that is because, well, just the last couple of weeks, I've been pumping it out over the weekend, you know, especially the last couple of days of the week, you know, been trying to get my head around a routine that was based around a bit of a difficult topic, because if I got it wrong, I could have either lost the crowd or just bombed, completely destroyed. But I did a good job. But at the same time, I want to be at the level with this routine in particular, of the topic that it is, that it's getting as good a laughs as my other two, which I consider to be greatest routines that I've done, that have gone into basically into repetition. And every venue that I've done those two routines at, it's gotten a response. I've done this new one at a couple, and it's gotten a decent response. But decent isn't going to get to the next level. And then as well, it's like, well, people have said, you know, just need to slow down. You just need to slow down and do other routines and get them in your head, you know, till you know them inside and out. And that's a problem with me. Because as an overthinker, I already, and that's not me being egotistical or anything, that's me saying, I already know those two routines so far inside out that I'm trying to tweak the tiniest little inconspicuous little gaps in that routine, in that particular routine, in one of those particular, you know, both those routines where maybe an ovation or response wasn't quite as good, and see if I can't make it even better again. So down to the finite level, just trying to think. And it's hard because they're great routines to try and tamper, to try and mess with them at this point. I did it once with my gay marriage equality routine. The first time I'd ever done that routine, in its earliest form, which was just simply the gay routine, as I call it, where that was my second ever routine. I don't regard it as complete 5-minute routine because it was mixed in with a couple of other jokes that were centered around the time period and maybe just a tad bit of padding out, because it was my second ever gig, and I got a good response. It got me a good response in that second gig, and it was the first time that I tested out one topic for 5 minutes, just sticking to one instead of jumping from one to another, to another, to another, to another. And I was pleased with that. And when it came, because, backtrack a little further, because my first ever routine was a sampler routine, my first ever gig. So that it was a little bit of a safety net. So I didn't know what would be funny and what wouldn't. And these were all sampler routine, just first liners jokes of a greater routine that I plan to make down the track, that could each form their own 5-minute routine later down the track. And what basically I did was just different topics, tested them out. Did it work? Didn't it? And most of them did, some of them didn't. But also, so I could just see what's funny, what's not, what does the audience, what's their reception. The gay routine, which I did, which was okay, got a decent response. Then basically the third one that I ever did was a cop routine based around one of the incidences which occurred in Queensland with regards to police giving out private information from domestic violence victim, to his mate just as a laugh, and he wanted it and this cop gave it to him and thought it would be really funny, just favour for mates, and it was just disgusting, but also hitting on a couple other topics, and it was well received as well. Then the sex routine, which I tried, and it failed. It didn't bomb, but it basically got a decent response, a couple of jokes, but the rest of it, there were hecklers and they got in and they basically took over the routine, and it was after State of Origin as well. And my first opening joke, I should have known, I did the joke, it's like, oh, come on guys, it's Monday, it's like everyone cheering, hey, how's everyone doing? Yeah, it's bad, no cheering, it's Monday, and the Blues won the Origin, and it got, they won game one of the Origin, whatever it was. I think it was just game one, because they don't think they won. They didn't win, rather. See, that's me overthinking it again. Correcting myself as I think, as I talk. And then the crowd, even though it was Queensland, cheering the Blues like, crap. And I pretty much lost them in the beginning, partly. And there were some other things that just got them a little bit back, but there was just a couple of hecklers in the audience that were just trying to take away from the show, and it wasn't fair. After that, went back, did Ice Kids routine, which was well received. Then after that, the John routine, which fast forward, did that one again later down the track before I decided to work on another routine. It flopped at another venue, flatlined, devastated, because on one venue it did good, another it flatlined completely. It wasn't fair. But getting to, because I did the Ice Kids routine, did a car park routine, did the John routine, this car park routine was my second most successful routine, and there were parts out of that I had to edit out because it just wasn't working, and a couple of bits weren't funny. And then, then told the cinema story. Then go, I'm probably losing half the audience because I think it's too much right now. They're just thinking about it. But basically, then went to America, did the LA routine that I did there, just a bit of testing because I only had 3 minutes. I got some laughs there. And then I started working on the gay routine. I added some to it, and it didn't work. It kind of changed it to the point where the audience now didn't like it as much as the first time. So then I had to think to myself, because the LA routine, I was going to turn that, because it was centered around marriage equality, whereas the gay routine was simply more or less centered around, gays. And I combined the two routines together. That was a gamble and it was a risk, but it was something that I thought, and I really had it in my head. And I was thinking about it since then, and I took it real personally. because that gay routine that I did, if I had to throw that away, it would have been bad, because that was a good routine. It just had a bad response and just a couple of things that didn't work. People just weren't giving me a chance. So I had to formulate that routine to make it perfect for every audience, and I managed to do that. So the positive of overthinking is that I managed to do it because I just worked and worked and worked and worked and worked and just went through it again and again and again. And then because before that, one of the things that a couple of people said, that's why I went back to a couple of routines, is because I was doing a different routine every single week. And I got up to 9 routines before I basically went back and tested out one routine at a different venue, and then another routine at a different venue, and then started working on one. And that was the one that I worked on. It didn't work the first time. I rebooted, rehashed it. Then after that, the next version of it killed. It went magnificent, and I tested it at every venue that I did it, and it was the best routine that I've ever done. And then I did the same with another routine. Like the John routine, my driving instructor at the past, it didn't work. So, but that one was flatlined completely, so I went to the next one, the car park routine. And what is called my most politically incorrect routine ever. But it worked so well. Because the thing about it is, and the overthinking of the routine as well, this is how much I thought cleverly about this routine, because it goes into several different bits through, car parking, and also centered around political correctness, but also centered around people who park in handicapped spots that don't have a disability. And I refer to them as retards. And then I go through a whole bit where then, different scenarios of people parking in handicapped spots and exceptions and non-exceptions and different topics regarding it. And thinking back through it, it's like, this is smarter than I've ever realized, because I haven't actually made fun of anyone with a mental or physical disability at all. But I have made fun of everyone else surrounding that situation, especially anyone who ever does park in a disabled spot and does not have a permanent disability, and also people who are entitled and use technicalities to get, to try and wheedle their way through circumstance. There are people that are disabled that can't get permits, and then there are others that easily get it because they meet a certain requirement. And there's a level of deliberation there where they just do it because it's just easier for them. And, I guess just thinking about the next routine as well, the one I did after that, or the next one that I've been working on right now, is regarding consent. It's a real hard topic to get around, but it was motivated by people who are actually discussing this topic. And that's something to think about as well. What is consent? And that's something that I want to get into the routine, but also the overthinking part of me. Because there are people that, on one side of the argument, the massive argument, and I'm going to put it out there, and if anyone hears it, okay, sure. I've just outed myself as saying, your threads motivated me and my next routine's topic to get my opinion out on it. And basically, it is favoring what is respectful more so than what is consensual, but also being respectful of a person's consent. And my generalized opinion of it is, of course, there are people on one side of the argument heavily arguing and saying that you can wear whatever, you should be able to wear whatever you want. And, of course, I agree with that, but doesn't always necessarily mean that you should. Just because you can wear whatever you want doesn't mean necessarily you should, because there are certain settings where certain attires may be inappropriate, and also, go to the far comedic side of it. Not that it's included in the routine, at least not at this stage. I don't think it ever will be, but the joke that I was considering putting in there was, can't wear whatever you want, because otherwise, the Lady Gaga meat suit, and then go swimming in the Pacific Ocean and then say to a shark, hey, it's my right to swim here, you don't have the right to eat me. But because there are predators out there, but because that's more of an observation rather than humor, it's like, can't include that. And then the other side of things, where it's like, just because you can say whatever you want doesn't mean necessarily you should. Another outtake joke of that one was basically, certain words you can't say in the English language. We all know a lot of what they are. But one thing I definitely can't say, and at one point I was looking around a joke, basically, think about Nana. Think about what would Nana want. And I was saying it to myself, like, I don't like this. It's funny, but I don't like it. This joke goes like this. I'll give it to you because then that way it'll never be heard again. But the joke basically goes around, okay, you can't, just because you can wear whatever you want doesn't necessarily mean you should. Like, for example, I think there was one example where it was like, obese man wearing skin-colored lycra. But then I was like thinking around, okay, Nana rocking camel toe. But, some people might find that funny, shock humor, but then it's like, it's just not me. As I'm saying it to myself, I'm trying to convince myself, that's funny, include it. But then I'm thinking to myself as well, no, that's not your angle. That's not you. That's not how you should be, that's not your comedy shtick. That's not for you. And then the joke that lead on, just because you can say whatever you want doesn't mean you should, would lead off to the other one to say, hey, if I go to hit on your grandma and then say, hey, like what you're rocking in that undercarriage right there, why don't we come back to your place and we'll wiggle that big toe. See, funny, yeah, maybe to a degree. And some people would find that funny and a bit of shock humor, but not me, not my fit. And also, I give a shout out right now to a new friend of mine, a friend who I sort of got to know at one gig, but really got to know him better, and funnily enough, because I had hardly a voice at the time, saw him sitting there by himself, figured I'm going to be the polite guy and go up to him and say hi, and I was thinking to myself at the same time, see, this is where the overthinking thing comes. I'm talking to him, guy's name's Scott, one of the nicest guys I've ever met, and I consider him already, even though we barely know each other, a very good friend of mine, a very good person, genuine, kind-hearted person. Shout out to Scott right there. He knows who he is, and if he's listening to this right now, hello, how you doing? Maybe I'll get you on the show sometime. Yeah, that's if anyone's actually listening. See, overthinking still. But basically, while I was talking to him, at the time, I had no voice, or I was maybe 5 minutes of good usable voice, if I was lucky, or maybe 5 to 30 minutes of talk, because I got sick and throat infection and then the phlegm down the throat, so I pretty much lost my voice for a couple of days, and I barely had my voice back. And I was there at Magic Mike, which I'm actually coming from right now. Basically went there, saw the show, always good comedians there. It's an independent gig that's run there. Should go out there if you're ever in West End of Brisbane. Apart from the gigs around the Sit Down Comedy Club, but Magic Mike is also a good place to go. But anyway, so he was there, and I figured, I'm going to talk to, say hi, do the polite thing, and we were talking and everything, and I was thinking to myself as well, you're being polite, that's great, you're doing the polite thing, you're talking to this guy, but at the same time, I was also thinking to myself, dude, what are you doing? You don't have much voice left, and you're using your voice on this guy. Maybe you should just be polite and tell this guy, and then as well, I was like, yep, because he could tell I had hardly a voice. It's like, yep, just sort of the jokey compliment thing. It's like, yep, I've hardly got a voice left. I'm using some of my last minutes of my voice on you, so you should count yourself as, really commend you. Just sort of struck off, friendship right there. And, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I'm counting in my head, I've probably got about 15 minutes of usable voice. So how long can I talk to these people and polite conversation before you're going to have to be just politely just basically cut off the conversation, say, look, I want to save the rest of my voice. So, but then I wanted to be polite as well, sticking in my head, be polite, got to do the right thing, and, don't cut the conversation short. So I got some drink and was sipping that down to try and keep my voice going. It bought me a few more minutes. At least that was like what it was like in my head. And then at the same time, thinking about my routine, because at the time, it was because the car park routine that I was doing, my second greatest routine, which I now believe in my mind of minds, has been perfected to a point where it's got a timeless quality, like the one that was mentioned before, and people are wondering, what routines am I talking about right now? Well, the reason why I'm not going through them is because if I gave them away for free on the podcast and nobody would go to see my gigs, they'd just go, all I got to do is just listen to this podcast. If I get to the point of fame and fortune where someone records it and then puts it somewhere and uses part of it, but at least then people will be going to see me and they'll be waiting to hear that joke again. But at this stage, not quite there yet, but yes. So I was still thinking in my head, okay, the routine, there's still a couple of bits in it that I got to work on. A little bit at the beginning, a little bit at the end, and just thinking about all that at the same. Now, as well as that, future prospects. Got to think way down the track. All these things going through my head, and all these things that I'm doing right now. Somewhere in the back of my head, because I'm doing all the recordings for YouTube, including this one right now, which is basically Go Home Podcast, where it could be something that I will branch off, and maybe it's something that I'll have a part 2 of. Turning my brain off. Maybe I'll make just a part 1, part 2, part 3, because at the same time, it's like I know what the answers are. But at the same time, there's time that has to be applied to the answer for it to be a solution. And I want it now. It's the impatience, but then you've got to be patient. Things that are got to be done, that haven't been done, that are swimming around in the back of my head. Working on recordings. Working on routines. Thinking about... God. Thinking about how far down the line should I be thinking? Because at this stage as well, I'm doing one routine, come up with a joke. At this point, my brain is in overdrive. So I'm thinking about things, and there is a part where I'm also observing other comedians, gauging the crowd's response more than I'm gauging the jokes of the comedian, because at the same time, you always observe the comedians. If you're in the crowd, support other comedians, and at the same time, there is that aspect, in any field, anywhere, you kind of think to yourself, okay, they said that, what's the audience's reaction? How did they gauge it? How did they take it? What was well received and what wasn't? What can they get away with and what can you not get away with? Their personality can get away with this, can you get away with that? You can't get away with that. But how can you fit that in your routine that's insinuative enough that people, if they think about it, that you're basically telling the joke that you would have told directly in the manner that someone else would have told it, but because you slipped it in, it's kind of suggestive more than it is actual, and it becomes clever rather than, this seemingly nice, clean-cut guy who doesn't swear on stage and everything else has just gone smutty and, just sort of like a slug, just like, creepy, can't believe a guy like him would say something like that sort of thing. But because always thinking about that, but then also thinking what works, because a lot of people sandwich their new jokes in with old routines, and I have not done that. I've always gone out with a full new routine, full new 5 minutes, and slip different stuff in. If one didn't work, take it out, because if it's working as a whole routine, I don't want to slip it in with another, because then it could tend to spoil it just a little. That's at least my opinion. Some other people can certainly get away with it because the joke stands alone, and maybe the same for mine, but it's just something that I'm not really willing to do, but that's just me versus others. But then thinking of something, any conversation now, I'm feeling like I'm always on at the moment. Like if I say something funny and I don't have it written down, or I don't have something to write it down, I have to remember that for as long as I can, because otherwise, if I don't and I forget it, that's basically material that's just gone, dissolved, disappeared. That's not a good thing. So now basically I've got my phone and tons of notes in there from things that are funny and observation, and then maybe I'll go back through it later and find something not funny, and I'll think of something even funnier. But then the killer thing about it is the overthinking. I'll be trying to get to sleep at night. And I've even done this with podcasts a couple of times. And I know for a fact that if I'd recorded the podcast for the USA trip when I did, because let's face the facts, USA trip, my little quick review of it was alright, but I'll be the first one to say it could have been better, because I did it at the end of the day after everything else. It was the first time that Alan had done a podcast, and first time I'd done a podcast with someone else. It was all new, and also because I recorded it in all 3 parts, so basically nearly 4 hours of recording, and that was after a lot of other recordings that we did that day for Tekken Challenge, which will be on the channel soon, and also this virtual reality, which is a sort of a pun on the podcast, this version of reality, but also it's basically virtual reality gaming. And the first one, which will come out once the US tour series is done, that will come out, and it's us playing through. It'll be on a Wednesday where Alan will play, or maybe the first one, I think it's different order, but basically it'll be Wednesday, Alan playing through Robo Recall. It's probably one of the best virtual reality games I've ever played, one of the first virtual reality games that I've ever played. And then on the Friday, me playing through, so you get the expert point of view, guy who's played it several times before, and a guy who's playing it for the first time. And so we'd done all those recordings in succession and then gone to the podcast. And because I'd even thought, different topics of podcasts, did things at night, presentations. I've even gone through so-called routines that I would do if I ever had to MC a gig. Hey, y'all know what you're thinking. What a psychopath. You're not even in the industry that long yet, and you're thinking that far ahead. Who the hell do you think you are? That's the thing. I'm thinking about who I'm thinking I think I am. I've already thought about that. See what I'm getting at? Turn the brain off. Stop thinking. It's something that's difficult, something that should do, something that I need to. And I know how to do it, but then at the same time it's like, but I don't wanna. Because if I turn my brain off, then I'm not doing anything. If I'm not doing anything, then perhaps it's just, maybe there's just something else there that needs to work through. Maybe. Just maybe. Something perhaps about life and living, where if I turn my brain off, stop acting, stop doing, maybe it's the near 30 year, the quarter life crisis sort of thing. Who knows? I haven't had any anxiety or panic attacks or anything like that. So, I guess that's a plus. But then, I've done it for many different things. I've basically gone through with competitions, like, martial arts competitions and athletics events, where I've basically just had my mind and just thought things over and gotten myself in such an intense zone where I basically put myself in a mental state where it's like, boom, now it's on. But to get to that state, it's a great level of intensity where basically my mind shifts into the zone, into, one track focus, just basically nothing else is around me. It's just me. and whatever is in front of me. And that could be a scary thing as well, I guess, under the right or wrong circumstances. Like, everything else that could be a distraction has just been completely taken out, and now I'm completely focused on this one thing. Couldn't be a good thing because it's a commitment to a task, but then as well, there could be something simple as if someone's trying to get into a fight with me or someone else, trying to abuse someone, and then, boom, right in that zone, and then it's like, I've had situations even where people have gotten right in my face. You know how they do that thing where they try and get you to flinch, where they're like within inches of your face, like just inches of your face, and try to, taunt you like, and it's like right there, and not one budge, not one flinch, nothing. And while I'm focused on that person, I'm also thinking to myself, no, there's no reaction, none whatsoever. It's not going to get me to react in that manner, not going to get me to flinch in that zone. And it kind of intimidates them as well. And I'm thinking about that as well, thinking, well, because if he interprets that incorrectly and then goes for an actual hit, then who's going to get in first? What's going to happen if he actually decides to commit? Then the game changes. Now you've got to shift completely into attack mode. God, we just really went from one place to another, didn't we? We went from comedy right to fighting. It's all about the mind, all about my mind, trying to get a little deeper into my psyche. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Am I just on a psychotic rant? Perhaps. But if you're listening to this, then hey, good for you. I don't know. That's pretty much all I got to say about that. But, But yeah, even relationships. There are people that I've wanted to ask out. There are people that I've gone out with. And I've basically visualized in my mind the entire relationship, gone through my head of how it went, how it would go, and basically how it would end because, it's just not going to work out. So I've already, in the most complex manner, gone through my mind about how this ain't going to work. And here are all the reasons why. And I'm basing it on logic and reasoning. And I've taken it through many different virtual scenarios in my head. And I literally cannot see how this will work any further from this point. Even a couple of my, not to say serious relationship, but a couple of relationships that I have had in the beginning, sort of thinking, are there ways that, I've just had to say to myself, stop thinking about it, just do it, just go for it. And then for some time, it has been a success, but then some scenario for which because I stopped thinking and stopped analyzing and being analytical and deep in thought, and then ended up being taken advantage of because of my good-willed nature, and the relationship falls apart then because I then decide to cut myself off from that relationship, which has now become very one-sided, and then I become the bad guy because, now I'm not giving, and then the other person becomes childish in that matter because I'm not giving what they want, which is me and everything that I have to offer. Good old relationships with people in general. Even conversations in many different scenarios. And people in general. I have thought so many, and there are people in my life and people that have recently even come back into my life in some way, shape or manner. And I've thought out every potential scenario because not everyone that's in my life we're necessarily on the best of terms. And same can be said for many people, that there's that always at least one person in your life that unfortunately, try as you might, you're just not on 100% good terms with that person. And the reason for that simply because, something's happened in your life, something they did, something they didn't do, something direct, something indirect in that manner, something maybe that was an accident or deliberate, maybe some difference of opinion, maybe it was something that you simply did or didn't do, all those different scenarios, all the different, circumstances. Maybe it was someone else, maybe it was nothing, maybe it was nothing to you and something to someone else. I've seen relationships break down over a simple difference of opinion, people that were the best of friends, and then turn bitter enemies over a simple disagreement. One of which actually happened to be over just a simple debate over consent. And it's just amazing, because then a lot of these scenarios, I've thought it through. And I think it over and over and over. And I think to myself, why am I not a psychiatrist? Why am I not a psychologist at the very least? Just to get the qualifications, just so I can say I at least know what I'm talking about. Maybe not for a profession. Maybe just so I can go around and say, I'm qualified with my opinion, so listen to me. But then a piece of paper. Think about that. Does that qualify a person? There are a few people that I know that have gone through the field of psychology and then done nothing with it. Or they pretend like they've gotten something out of it. And unfortunately, they don't really know what they're talking about, because they're not applying the knowledge. They're trying to apply textbook knowledge to a real life situation, which I guess you could almost say is quite Freudian in a manner, where not all techniques, one size fits all is necessarily going to work. And some methods and everything is outdated. Necessarily, just because it's in a textbook doesn't mean, that's the answer. 2 plus 2 equals 4, but 2 times 2 also equals 4. There are different answers with same solution. It'll get you to the same place. Not necessarily has to be one fit. It could be different, but still have the same desired result to get to that point. But yeah, there are people out there, unfortunately, I know a couple that just simply, because I know better, and then they give out poor advice for themselves and others. They don't know what they're talking about. And many times where they've come back to me and said, God, you were right on the money. Like, for example, one situation where there was this guy who was a team leader of a department in a field of a person I know who was working, or a couple actually of people that I know who are working in a certain field of profession. And this guy was basically, it was mostly a team of young people, and then a couple of older people in this team, in the profession, in the job. And this guy would hound on them and comments basically, you got to keep up with the young fellas, otherwise you get left behind, sort of thing. And then also at the later stage where it's like, you basically outshine, basically always commenting on the age of the other people, and using that sometimes as a means of critiquing, and other times as a means of basically positive reinforcement, like, for an old person, you're really shining up these young guys, these young guns, you're making them look bad. I met him once in person before a comedy event years ago. This was back when the comedy thing was in the back of my mind, where I was even thinking about it back then. It took me 3 years before I basically considered it the right time to get myself into comedy. And I feel that I've done the right thing. I feel that I made the right call, because now is a perfect time. But anyway, I'm kind of sidetracking. But this guy had essentially gone and, introduced and was sort of just, just kind of a bit up himself. But I made a very quick observation about him, because he was wearing a polo shirt, and he was trying to, just sort of wear brighter colours. And he was wearing shorts. I think he was wearing shorts. They were maybe long shorts. And like a sky blue polo shirt. And sort of a clean-cut gentleman. But immediately I was like... So... This guy is... He was wearing a polo shirt. It's like, the only people who wear polo shirts are, people who want to look younger. It's like, I'm guessing he's at least, how old is he? Because I'm guessing he's at least 30 to 40. It's like, he's a 30-year-old. He wants to look like he's in his 20s. He's dressing like he's in his 20s. It's like, oh yeah, he's in 30s, 40s. It's like, how'd you know? It's like, so in other words, he's old and he's not comfortable with it. And they both, these two people that were older looked at each other and go, oh my God, we couldn't have put it in better words. My God, you are so observant. And it's like, yep, this guy is commenting on your age and everything because he feels old himself. These two are older than him. He keeps commenting on age. He's trying to look younger himself. He's, it's all about age with him. And my friends, I believe it was actually out because he, it's like, oh yeah, I'll wear polo shirts. It's like, yeah, and you comfortable with it? And because the observation is simply anyone who wears a polo shirt is old and not comfortable with it, but they're trying to look younger. And it's the truth. It really is, And it was a spot-on observation. And I've made many spot-on observations. Guess that does, without sounding all egotistical and everything, but it does come with my martial arts training. I have had plenty of observation, being able to pick things ahead of time, things, and maybe that's just a part of the overthinking as well. Seeing things ahead of time, picking things apart, analyzing, being analytical, going in and having my guard completely up so that I can prevent any bad things from happening. Maybe that's it as well. Maybe it's all the bad stuff that has occurred in my life that I'm trying to make sure that never happens again. And that I need to be always on, need to stay on the mark, just need to stay on the ball. Maybe that's it. Or maybe I've been going on a tangent, on a rant. Maybe that's all this is. Maybe this is nothing but content filler. Maybe. But I guess if anyone has listened to my kind of bit about the overthinking, what do you think? And that's no pun intended, but hey, what are your thoughts? I would actually like to try and get people to kind of gauge this and discuss this. Maybe we'll get a bit of a discussion going on the podcast and in a more professional setting, because I know there are a couple of people that wouldn't mind having that bit of a discussion about this topic, because there is something definitely to be said about what goes on in people's minds, and also maybe what is what is absolutely the correct way to go about an active mind. Take a walk, get the zen, get them rests, take some pills, maybe not so much that. Not a good idea always, because especially if you rely on medication to try and relax yourself, and, bad things can happen because, well, they're just examples upon examples, unfortunately, where people have mixed, and that's something else to think about as well, where people have mixed medications with substances and other things, alcohol, and things just don't go quite as planned. Yeah, but hey, I think that we're going to do this. I'm going to try and push for this podcast here to be the most important one that I've done. Yeah, sure. I will be honest, and I will say that the Big Fight and Crazy Comedy Night podcast was a good podcast. It was alright. I consider my Halloween podcast perhaps to be the best one that I've done. And even perhaps the UFC 217 custom commentary. I consider those to be, but I want this one to be the glass ceiling breaker. I want this one to be the one where this gets a discussion going, and let's get some other people on. Let's get the topic going. Let's get the discussion going about different things, and maybe just generally what other people might want to talk about as well. And especially the people around me, because a few people that I know that I'm close to, or maybe I haven't heard from in a while, why don't you shoot me a PMesh? A private message. I call it a PMesh. Maybe that's what we should call private messages nowadays. Yeah, PMesh. Yeah, PMesh. No, private message. Shoot me a private message. Or maybe I should actually use a Twitter account that I actually have and hashtag TVOR for this version of reality. But then that might just be character limited. So I guess I might just leave it here and say, shoot me a message if you want to discuss this, and we'll have it out. We'll have a discussion about this topic, and maybe different other topics. But I've gotten that off my head. It's made me feel a bit saner and a bit better. I'm gonna go buy some chocolate. Why? Because I want chocolate. Who doesn't like chocolate? If you don't like chocolate, you're a nutcase. You should be shot with a chocolate nut or something. Maybe you're allergic to chocolate. Anyway, I think I've run out of speech, out of legible words to say, so I'm just going to call it right here and say thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen and otherwise, for listening to this version of reality. In this version of reality, I talk about thinking that in the next version of reality, perhaps I will have somebody else to talk with me. But in the meantime, once again, thank you all for listening. My name is Liam, and I will see you guys next time.